Franz. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Dr. Alex Hanna is Director of Research at the Distributed AI Research Institute, DARE. A sociologist by training, her work centers on the data used in new computational technologies and the ways in which these data exacerbate racial, gender, and class inequality. She also works in the area of social movements, focusing on the dynamics of anti-racist campus protests in the US and Canada. She holds a BS in computer science and mathematics and a BA in sociology from Purdue University and an MS and a PhD in sociology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Alex's talk today is titled The AI Con: How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alex Hanna.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I'm going to set up my slides, and apologies, we didn't get a tech check before this. So we'll do my darndest, and I hope everything works. So let's see. Let me do that. Can everyone see that okay? Let me see if I can, okay, thumbs up, cool. I think you can probably still see that top bar. So let's see if I can just hide a few things while we're doing that. I think we can probably just get full screen. All right, great. All right, thanks so much. Thank you so much for this great introduction. Thank you for IRDL and all the host institutions for helping set this up. So the name of my talk today is The AI Con: How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want. It is based on a forthcoming book that I have co-authored with Dr. Emily M. Bender at the University of Washington, and it's out May 13th this year with Harper Books, and you can pre-order it at thecon.ai or wherever you pick up any fine books. Okay, so I want to start off with an anecdote. So in late 2023, inside the grand halls of the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C., Senator Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader at the time, led the eighth of a set of forums he had been convening around artificial intelligence, or AI. These insight forums were intended to provide the august body of the U.S. Senate with information on how to handle this quote-unquote brand new technology of AI. At this particular meeting, a number of notables were in attendance. Researcher Yoshua Bengio, who received one of computer science's highest honors for his work on AI. Jared Kaplan, co-founder of the influential AI startup Anthropic. Alexander Madry, OpenAI's head of preparedness. And Stuart Russell, an influential professor of computer science. Also in the room were people from civil society, including civil rights and nonprofit research groups like Data Society, policy institutes, and venture capital firms. Schumer began the conversation with an unusual prompt. What was everyone's P doom and P hope? This phrase references notation from statistics and is short for probability of doom/hope, referring to a popular trope that machines with minds of their own perhaps will kill us all, intentionally or unintentionally. Estimates from in the room range from 0 up to 90% according to the reporting after the event. Probability of doom, especially when written in the mathy-looking format p-doom, sounds like an important sophisticated metric. But these stark terms are meant to grab headlines and grant an inflated sense of self-importance to those in the room. Doom reminds us of titanic, cartoonish, villainous battles of good versus evil, and the cartoonish connotations are apt. Just like those fictional battles, p-doom estimates in fantasy. But that hasn't prevented this imaginary metric from becoming a fixation of lawmakers, venture capitalists, and Silicon Valley's managerial class. We imagine part of the appeal is that it allows people in power to imagine themselves as heroes out to save humanity, while actually turning away from the very real threats to actual people. For example, the probability of techno-enabled doom brought about through automated state violence is very high for some citizens of Detroit. In January 2020, Robert Williams was arrested in front of his two young daughters while Detroit police trusted the result of a database search of 49 million photos that matched his driver's license photo to a freeze frame from a surveillance video of a theft committed by someone else 2 years earlier. The detectives didn't acknowledge error until Williams held the printed freeze frame next to his face. A doomsday scenario has also arrived for teenagers, especially teenage girls, in the form of apps that purport to undress a person in an image. These image generation apps automate the task of making deepfake porn, allowing high school students to sexually harass and bully their classmates with a few clicks. In 2023, the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's war-driven cabinet leveraged a system, again marketed as AI, in carrying out their assault on the Gaza Strip, in which tens of thousands of civilians were killed in just the first 3 months. While the AI system was far from the only ingredient in what the head of the International Committee of the Red Cross and spokesman for the United Nations office both called hell on earth, it served the purpose of rapidly escalating and justifying target selection. Using a system called the Gospel, the IDF dramatically expanded the scope of possible targets to include so-called power targets, which include high-rise residential blocks where a single Hamas member may live. In the words of one former officer, the system facilitates a mass assassination factory. But harms befalling real people are not what P-Doom refers to. Despite what many leaders in DC, New York, and Silicon Valley say, P-Doom is the wrong metric and the wrong framing. It serves to obfuscate what's really going on. Artificial intelligence, if we're being frank, is a con, a bill of goods you're being sold to line someone's pockets. A few major well-placed players are poised to accumulate significant wealth by extracting value from other people's creative work, personal data, or labor, and replacing quality services with artificial facsimiles. The language of P-Doom is a ruse to keep us focused on imaginary scenarios filled with awe at modern robber barons' allegedly potentially world-ending technology, and too distracted to see daily harms being done in its name. We call this type of con AI hype. Hype is not particularly new. In fact, we've been through several AI hype cycles before. A characteristic of our current AI hype cycle is that the con men are taking a series of tropes of science fiction, of artificial minds hell-bent on turning us into paperclips, or Terminators waging war for their right to exist and look cool on motorcycles, and injecting them into discussions at the highest echelons of business and government. This framing is useful to those creating the technology because it makes them appear powerful, if not godlike in their technological creation. But this belies what these technologies are doing to the rest of us, threatening stable careers and replacing them with gig work, slashing personnel in government, cheapening our social services, and degrading creativity. We should say AI itself is a marketing term, speaking about a particular, and when we speak about a particular technology, we aim to be as precise as possible, following people like Emily Tucker and Lucy Suchman. But when referring to these technologies in general, we will sometimes use the shorthand abbreviation of AI. But imagine every time that I use this term, have some scare quotes around me. Some of our favorite replacements for this, we can replace the term AI. Some of our favorites are mathy maths, a racist pile of linear algebra, stochastic parrots, referring specifically to large language models, or systematic approaches to learning algorithms and machine inferences, or salami. The set of technologies that get sold as AI is diverse in both application and construction. In fact, we wouldn't be surprised if some of the tech being sold this way is actually just a fancy wrapper around some spreadsheets. The term serves to obscure that diversity, however, so the conversation becomes clearer if we speak in terms of automation rather than AI and look precisely at what is being automated. So there's a few things. One is decision making. The first group includes computers to automate consequential decisions, and this is covered very adroitly in Virginia Eubanks's Automating Inequality. These are called automated decision systems, and they are often used, for example, in the process of setting bail, approving loans, screening resumes, or allocating social benefits. These uses are contentious, as they should be, because they have extreme ramifications for people who are subject to the system's recommendations. Classification. The second type of automation includes this kind of classification of inputs into different categories. So image classification can be used for consumers to organize their photos. Are these pictures of blueberry muffins or chihuahuas? Or it can be used by governments or surveillance, matching a security footage of an individual to a driver's license photo. Recommendation. We can think of systems that present to people new products or new types of cultural items based on their prior consumption. These systems are called recommender systems. They order our social media feeds on Facebook and Twitter, Amazon product recommendations, or movie suggestions on Netflix. Transcription and translation. The fourth type moves from one format to another. Things like automatic speech recognition, finding characters and images like automatic license plate readers, machine translation of one language to the other. And here's an image of the infamous Babelfish from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, after which an early web-based machine translation engine had been based, or had been named, excuse me. And then finally, we get to this thing called generative AI. That's the text and image generation, what these synthetic media machines that we see in the everyday world, where we prompt something that's in generative AI technology, and then it gets outputs some other thing, whether that's text in terms of technologies like ChatGPT, or images with technologies like DALL-E or Midjourney. Lumping all these different technologies under the label of AI creates the illusion of intelligence. If our photo software sharpening tool is imagined to be the same thing as a system that appears to cheerfully answer questions on any topic, both are perceived as more intelligent or even magical than each alone, and we're more likely to accept automation in other domains, like deciding who gets social benefits and who is classified as a repeat offender. So what is hype? And what is AI hype? So hype is the aggrandizement of some person, artifact, technology, or technique that you, the consumer, absolutely need to buy or invest in as early as possible, lest you miss out on entertainment or pleasure, monetary reward, return on investment, or market share. In the hip-hop world, the hype man is an accessory to the main act, the person who amps up the crowd for their employer. Software development conferences might seem like the antithesis of hip-hop conferences, but then Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer played the hype man at a 1999 Microsoft event. Voice hoarse, visibly sweaty, he pranced around the stage chanting, "Developers, developers, developers," and managed to get his audience of software engineers and managers to pick up the chant, buying into his hype about a mundane software framework. Like other types of hype, AI hype plays on FOMO. It is a repeated message of a set of technologies, currently a set of statistical methods developed within computer science and engineering, which will change the world, and you, the consumer and corporate manager, absolutely must use it, lest you be left in the dust. As a consumer, if you don't get in on the hype product, you'll be seen as a regressive Luddite, lacking in modern skills, and or have your job automated away. If you're a corporate manager, you have to get on board or competitors will eat your lunch. If you're a computer programmer, you have to use these tools, otherwise you'll be wasting time, you won't meet product deadlines. And if you're a student, you have to thoroughly understand AI to take on today's modern workplace, or else you'll get passed up for job opportunities. But AI hype isn't new. As long as there's been research on AI, there's been AI hype. In the most commonly told narrative about the research field's development, mathematician John McCarthy and computer science Marvin Minsky organized a summer-long workshop in 1956 at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, to discuss a set of methods called thinking machines. The term artificial intelligence is attributed to McCarthy, who was pulling it out of thin air. So they got a bunch of people together for a 2-month convening, and they suggested they would make significant advance in this area of research. Fundamentally, the forerunners of this new field were concerned with translating dynamics of power and control into machine-readable formulations. These men were concerned with developing tools that could ultimately use for the administration of military systems. And in an environment where the battle for American supremacy in the Cold War was being fought on all fronts, military, technological, engineering, and ideological, these men sought to gain favor and funding in the eyes of a defense apparatus trying to edge out the Soviets. And the first move of the original AI playbook was that foregrounding of the fight with the Soviets, and I should say we're seeing a lot of the same kind of language now in the battle for economic supremacy with China. The second was to argue that computers were likely to match human capabilities by arguing that humans weren't really all that complex. In 1956, Minsky claimed in an influential paper that human beings are instances of certain kinds of very complicated machines. If that indeed were the case, we could use more controllable electronic circuits in place of people in military and industrial contexts. Nowadays, there is a push to not only get those contracts, but also for an increasing drive towards venture capital. The murky, unethical funding networks through unfettered weapons manufacturing then, and the addition of ballooning speculative venture capital investments now around a continue to this day. So does the drawing of false equivalences between the human brain and calculating capabilities of machines. Claiming such false equivalences inspires awe, which in turn can be used to reel in boatloads of money from investors whipped up into a FOMO frenzy. For example, in January 2023, Microsoft announced that it would intended to invest $10 billion in OpenAI. This is after Mustafa Suleyman, former CEO of DeepMind, made CEO of Microsoft AI in March 2024, and LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman received a cool $1.3 billion from Microsoft and chip maker NVIDIA in a funding round to their young startup Inflection.ai. OpenAI alums co-founded Anthropic, a company solely focused on creating generative AI tools, and received the cool $580 million in an investment round led by crypto scammer Sam Bankman-Fried. These startups and a slew of others have been chasing a gold mine of investment from venture capitalists and big tech companies, frequently without any clear path of robust monetization. By the second quarter of 2024, venture capital was dedicating $27.1 billion, or nearly half of their quarterly investments, to AI and machine learning companies. So we should say this sets the stage for what AI hype is and what is behind AI. Well, let's talk about some dangers of this AI hype wave. So first off, AI is a threat to workers, and it is a threat to the laborers writ large. In May 2023, the Writers Guild of America East and its counterpart, the WGA West, the labor unions representing Hollywood writers, went on strike. Hollywood jobs are envisioned to be creative, cushy careers, but in the age of Netflix, Hulu, and nearly every major legacy broadcaster creating a streaming service, writers' rooms have gotten smaller, and the job has become one of the front lines for cost-cutting measures. So, of course, Hollywood studios are enticed by the promise of not having to pay writers by leveraging AI-generated content. In addition to resisting the shrinkage of these workforces and the pittance the workers have received from streaming services, writers have pushed back against the studio's demand that they be allowed to explore the use of AI in the writer's room. Writers know how this story ends. Studios want to use AI to generate content and have humans in the room only to edit the results. I have a video, hopefully it'll play here. Oops. Sorry, I saw there's no sound. Sorry about that. Yeah, this is where I need to do the test. I don't exactly know how to change it. I think there's a setting to do this in Zoom, but I only have one other video and there's also captions, so thanks for your patience. Okay, so prior to the strike, that was Adam Conover, who's a writer, actor, and producer. talking about one of the kind of labor market pressures involved in AI and in the writers' room. So prior to the strike, studios were threatening so-called AI to gigify the jobs of many creatives throughout the television and movie industry. According to film producer and writer John Lopez, a member of WGA's AI writing group, studios wanted to force writers to rewrite scripts created, typically by producers with AI tools. Lopez notes that writers get paid much less for rewriting a script than for writing new ones. Even when the rewriting is so extensive, it might as well be a new script. The fight is not an isolated one. It's playing out in many different industries. That's because for corporations and venture capitalists, the appeal of AI is not that it is sentient or technologically revolutionary, but that it promises to make the jobs of huge swaths of labor redundant and unnecessary. Corporate executives in nearly every industry and mega margin maximizing consultancies like McKinsey, BlackRock, and Deloitte want to increase productivity with AI, which is consultant speak for replacing labor technology. But the fact is, AI isn't going to replace your job, but it will make your job a lot shittier. What actors and workers are fighting for is a future that doesn't relegate humans to babysitting, script writing, and acting algorithms, available on call, but only paid when the media synthesis machines glitch out. And we're already seeing this in industries as diverse as journalism, legal services, and the taxi industry. While executives suggest that AI is going to be a labor-saving device, in reality it's meant to be a labor-breaking one. It is intended to devalue labor by threatening workers with technology that can supposedly do their job at a fraction of the cost. Employers have been turning to media synthesis machines in some of the most sensitive domains with absolutely dire consequences. In one particularly piquing example, the National Eating Disorders Association, or NEDA, attempted to replace their workforce, a set of volunteer and paid coordinators and hotline operators, with a chatbot. This happened after NEDA workers, exhausted from the uptick of work during COVID, had voted to unionize under the moniker of the Helpline Associates United. Both paid workers and volunteers at NEDA encountered intense workloads, and despite being a place where others received mental health support, they received very little themselves. 2 weeks after unionizing, they were summarily fired for organizing together, a violation of U.S. labor law. Soon after, a poorly tested chatbot called Tessa was brought online. According to its creator, the chatbot was intended to provide a limited number of responses to a small number of questions about issues like body image. But Tessa was quickly found to be an impoverished replacement for workers, offering disordered eating suggestions to people calling the hotline. Eating disorder advocate and fat activist Sharon Maxwell documented how the chatbot offered healthy eating tips, quote, suggesting that she could safely lose 1 or 2 pounds a week through counting calories. These tips are the hallmarks of enabling disordered eating. The chatbot was quickly decommissioned, and the NEDA hotline has since been completely taken offline, creating a major gap in mental health services for those struggling with disordered eating. In short, NEDA tried to replace the work with actual people with an AI system, and the result was not doing more with less, but just less with greater potential for harm. Meanwhile, clothing models, people who make their careers out of showing clothes and walking the runway, are threatened by digital clones of their likenesses. During a roundtable hosted by the Federal Trade Commission, Sarah Ziff, executive director of the Model Alliance, an organization that aims to promote fair treatment, equal opportunity, and more sustainable practices in the fashion industry, noted that companies were using AI-generated deepfakes to add a semblance of diversity to their modeling roster. In one particularly egregious case, Levi's said it was going to use virtual models to showcase clothes on its website to, quote, increase the number and diversity of our models, claiming the use of these fake models would be more, quote, sustainable. In non-corporate speak, you can read this as costing less money by leaving out actual humans. And not only by leaving out humans, but especially leaving out models who are people of color, plus size, elders, and gender minorities. That said, most AI tools require a huge amount of hidden labor to make them work at all. This massive effort goes beyond the labor of babysitting machines operating in real time to the work of creating the data used to train the systems themselves. These kinds of workers do a host of tasks. They are asked to draw green highlighting boxes around objects and images coming from camera feeds of self-driving cars, rate how incoherent, helpful, or offensive the existing responses for language models are, label whether social media posts include hate speech or violent threats, and determine whether people in sexually provocative videos are minors. These workers handle a great deal of toxic content. Given that the media synthesis machines recombine internet images, companies require a screening process to prevent their users from seeing the worst of what the web has to offer. Billy Caringo at Time and Karen Howe at the Wall Street Journal reported how OpenAI has subcontracted Kenyan workers to making less than $2 a day to filter out gore, hate speech, sexual abuse material, and pornographic images from ChatGPT and OpenAI's image generation tool DALL-E. Those workers were lured in by the prospect of breaking into the lucrative field of computing, but ended up with PTSD and ravaged personal relationships due to mental health issues. This industry has been called by many names: crowd work, data labor, or ghost work, as the labor often goes unattended and unseen by consumers in the West. But this work is very visible for those who perform it. Jobs in which low-paid workers filter out correct or label text, images, videos, and sounds have been around for nearly as long as AI and the current era of deep learning methods has been. It's not an exaggeration to say that we wouldn't have the current wave of quote AI if it weren't for the availability of on-demand laborers who could be called upon at any time to perform a set of tasks whenever some AI researchers or corporate engineers demanded it. And here I want to give a shout out to a DARE project called the Data Workers Inquiry, which is a repository of worker-led stories and research on these issues. And you can find that at dataworkers.org. Um, so AI is not a, I want to move on. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and take this a second just to stop sharing because I got a note about how to actually enable sound. So I'm just going to take a second to do that. If I can stop the share, and then I'm going to reshare. Apologies for this. I'm just going to do this. Take 2 seconds. Where am I here? Okay, let me go back to the other window and exit out of full screen. Okay, and then I'm going to share again. This screen, and I'm going to click share sound. Excellent. Okay, back to it. The second thing I'd like to talk about is the rush to replace social services with these AI tools. So AI boosters will brag that these machines will make key services more accessible for everyone. Medical advice will be available free and on demand. Legal services will be available to anyone who needs them. And robot teachers will provide the care and knowledge that was available only in our wildest dreams. In reality, these parts of the parts of these that actually matter, like the relationships, economies of care, and time spent with professionals who want to help and understand your problem, will be devalued and replaced with cheap fakes for people who can't afford real professionals. And, of course, this is the path of widening inequality, making life worse for those already marginalized, the poor, Black and brown communities, and people in the majority world. National, regional, and municipal leaders have become particularly enamored by AI hype, and particularly by finding ways to offload the responsibilities of government to generative AI tools. In New York City, Eric Adams, former cop and wannabe tech bro, has thrown resources at technological toys, with results ranging from laughably ineffective to dangerous. This includes a short-lived New York City Police Department robot that was meant to patrol the Times Square subway station and needed 2 uniformed human minders to deter would-be vandalizers. Adams and his administration released a broad-reaching AI action plan that aims to integrate AI tools into many parts of city government. The centerpiece, which was a chatbot that could answer common questions for residents of the Big Apple. Unfortunately, that chatbot is unable to reliably retrieve and convey accurate information. Like all LLM-based chatbots, it was designed to make shit up. A 2024 investigation by the Markup document and the local New York City nonprofit The City revealed that the tool tells its users to flat out break the law. The chatbot responded that it's perfectly okay for landlords to discriminate based on whether those potential tenants need rental assistance, such as Section 8 vouchers. It also stated confidently that employers could steal workers' tips and could feel free to not inform workers of any significant schedule changes. These mistakes would be hilarious and absurd if they didn't have the potential to encourage employers to commit wage theft and landlords to discriminate against poor tenants. Despite all these rampant errors, the chatbot interface has all the authority of an official New York City government page. In the practice of law as well, we find many examples of people selling automation as an example for actual legal services, and of people who really should know better turning to ill-suited automation in their own legal practice. Law practitioners have been making news for using text extrusion machines to generate legal briefs and basing legal decisions on queries to those machines. Obvious errors in legal documents produced by chatbots are to be expected. Of course, they make shit up. But that hasn't stopped legal industry entrepreneurs from turning to the technology to make a quick buck. With funding from Andreessen Horowitz, Joshua Browder, who's not a licensed lawyer, founded DoNotPay.com in 2015. But by early 2023, Do Not Pay had upgraded to using OpenAI's GPT-3 and began seeking people willing to use it in real time by allowing the system to, quote, listen in court and parroting the chatbot's response aloud. In February of that year, someone had actually signed up to do this to contest a speeding ticket at a hearing. Browder had even offered on Twitter to pay $1 million to any lawyer who used the system to argue before the U.S. Supreme Court. But after various state bar associations started investigating Do Not Pay, they backed off from the live in court use case and went back to drafting notes for people seeking to do things like cancel subscriptions or deal with credit agencies. Just as in the provision of government services and in the practice of law, we see AI hype and the misapplication of automation crop up over and over again in medicine. Companies are rushing to market to get a piece of the windfall. Big tech companies, along with health startups, are intent on the creation of models that they argue could be used in diagnosis and treatment, patient monitoring, interpreting medical imaging, and in-facility triage. Researchers at Google and its subsidiary DeepMind proudly proclaimed in a 2023 paper published in Nature that their model, called MedPalm-2, could perform well at a new test that they created themselves, based on a national medical licensing exam. Well here means 68% accuracy on the exam, which is markedly, quote, inferior to clinicians. The lack of serious evaluation and poor accuracy rate hasn't stopped Greg Corrado, the head of health AI at Google Health, from going on a press tour, bragging about the tool to the Wall Street Journal and announcing it loudly at Google's massive developer convention, Google I/O. The journal reported additionally that the tool was being tested in actual hospitals, including the prestigious Mayo Clinic. Corrado himself admits that he wouldn't want the tool to be part of his family's healthcare journey. But in the same breath, he says the large language model will take the places in healthcare while AI can be beneficial and expand them by tenfold. And we know a tenfold increase on zero is still zero, so state might actually be true. In another egregious healthcare example, Hippocratic AI raised over $120 million of seed funding, including $50 million from Andreessen Horowitz and General Catalyst in a 2023 funding round. This startup advertises several dozen healthcare agents on their website. Their avatars are synthetically generated animations, a multicultural coterie of fake people wearing blue scrubs standing in a clinic or hospital. They each have their own specialties, such as pre-op colonoscopy or remote patient monitoring. The text under the specialties gives away the game, and I literally updated this image today, and they removed this. I can't find it on the site anymore. Advertising the estimated cost of each nurse substitute at less than $9 an hour. Clearly, the purpose here is to communicate to the investors behind privately run healthcare companies that they could dispense with the costs of actually skilled nursing care. Munjil Shah, Hippocratic CEO, confidently boasts that these agents can speak every language and remember every conversation with each patient. Moreover, the CEO states that his synthetic healthcare providers will be tested such that they will be surely showing empathy and taking a personal interest into a patient's life. Everything about Hippocratic AI is appalling. Shaw seems to have missed that empathy and personal interest both require subjective experience and human connection. Keeping a transcript of every conveniently already digitized interaction isn't remembering conversations, but it surely has been building up a trove of data for future monetization. And we're highly skeptical that Hippocratic AI is truly equipped to evaluate their systems in English or other widely spoken languages, let alone every language. All of this, of course, is just adding insult to the inevitable literal injury that will come if we offload diagnosis, healthcare advice, and patient care to automated systems designed simply to predict likely next words. Thirdly, AI degrades creativity and it hurts artists. To those selling the illusion of artificial intelligence, and to those who think they're actually building human-like entities, creativity stands as the ultimate goal and proof of success. Automating what is wrote and describable via algorithm is just industrial automation, but forging something capable of creativity demonstrates a quantum leap in a technology that could approximate activity that had been heretofore in the sole domain of human beings. Creating an entity that could evoke wonder and awe, produce verifiable science, or take the important work of journalistic inquiry and holding power to account would be a monumental step towards showing that, yes, indeed, these technologies are truly groundbreaking. However, that's not what's happening. Chatbots that can generate creative prose, poetry, or text that sounds like scientific writing or journalism are still only linking together word patterns they've uncovered in the data. So as an example, Imad Mostake, the founder and former CEO of Stability AI, has described their flagship product, the text-to-image tool Stable Diffusion, as democratizing image generation. Except that's not what's happening. Democratizing is this bizarre word that people are using. Mostly that means taking data from other people and typing in a prompt and replacing it with the craft of art. There are no synthetic media machines to date in any medium that are based on data collected in a way that respects existing artists. Greg Rutkowski, a visual artist whose art is known for its distinctive high fantasy design and has been used for tabletop games like Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, has been ripped off thousands of times by people using tools like Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. The proliferation of these tools has been only possible due to the blatant theft of content from working artists like Rutkowski. The people using that content are infringing on the very markets that those artists sell their work on to make their livings. Artist Carla Ortiz, a visual artist who has worked on projects for Marvel Studios and Industrial Light and Magic, reports losing income because these studios are using AI systems for things like character design and AI systems whose training data includes her own art. Ortiz has said that artists want three things, three C's: credit, consent, and compensation. If their works are being used to train models, they should be credited by the authors of any derivative works. Their works should only be used in this way if they have given their consent, and that consent should be continuous and revocable at any time. Lastly, these artists want to be paid for their work. These values are some of the most highly valued in the world. Why should artists who spent years perfecting their skill be left to starve as a few technical experts who steal their work get rich off it? Stability AI, after all, has raised at least $150 million in multiple funding rounds. Meanwhile, Julian Dawson, the founder and creator of Bards and Sages, a small publisher of speculative fiction and role-playing games, announced in March 2024 that she was closing up shop after 20 years. Dawson said an influx of AI-generated content was the final straw. The problem with AI is the people who use AI. They don't respect the written word, Dawson told 404 Media. She continues, these are people who think their ideas are more important than the actual craft of writing, so they churn out all these ideas. And their idea prompts and think They enter idea prompts and think the output is a story, but they never bother to learn the craft of writing. Most of them don't even read recreationally. They're more enamored with the idea of being a writer than the process of being a writer. They think in terms of quantity and not quality. And the disdain for creatives is palpable from AI boosters. In a verbal gaffe during an onstage talk, I don't know if it was a gaffe actually, at a talk at Dartmouth School of Engineering, Mir Murati, the former OpenAI CTO, said the quiet part aloud. I'll let her speak for herself here. Now the actual sound is going to work here. I'm gonna move here to the
Good afternoon.
Easily.
And you can extend the story never ends. Especially
You're
short.
saying that'll
sorry,
switch.
my cat stepped on the on the
Humans will figure
keyboard.
out how to make the creative part of the work just better.
I think so. And
Oh, my cat stepped on the keyboard and skipped the important part. I'm going to go again.
good afternoon, everyone. It's actually going to be really incredible.
Yeah, it could give me 200 different cliffhangers for the end of episode 1 or whatever.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
very easily.
And you can extend the story never ends. You
Yeah.
can just
Oh, keep going.
Continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm done writing. You keep going. Yeah. That's interesting.
But I think it's really going to be a collaborative tool, especially in the creative spaces, where
I do too.
yeah, more people will become more
There's
creative.
some fear
let's say.
right now.
Yes,
But
for
you're
sure.
saying that'll switch, and humans will figure out how to make the creative part of the work just better.
I think so. And you know, some creative jobs maybe will go away, but maybe they shouldn't have been there in the first place. You know, if the content that comes out of it is not very high quality. But I really believe that using it as a tool for education, creativity will expand our intelligence and creativity and imagination.
Okay. So, whoops.
Good.
Let me stop that. So, some jobs will just go away. We didn't need them to begin with because being bad at art means you shouldn't generate art. So not only happening in the field of visual art or design, but also in journalism, especially a field that has declined in prestige and revenue due to centralization, privatization, and media consolidation. So, for example, in late 2023, futurism journalist Maggie Harrison Dupre noticed something off about certain product reviews placed on the Sports Illustrated website. Several of the purported authors of the reviews placed in the once illustrious sports magazine had plausible sounding names but had no other online presence. The content of the product reviews also sounded bizarre. One for a volleyball states that the sport can be tricky to get into, especially without an actual ball to practice with. And after Dupre reached out to the publisher, the Arena Group, these authors were removed from the site without explanation, and a spokesperson from the company said that they licensed content from a company called Advon Commerce. Advon told Arena Group that the articles were all written by humans, but then after the publication of Dupre's article, Arena Group cut its ties with Advon and fired its own CEO. Dupre's investigative reporting on Advon wasn't limited to these fishy reviews, went deeper on how they were producing reviews and how common they were in practice. Advon relied on incredibly poor paid contractors in the majority world, tasked with correcting synthetic text for product reviews to be used for a whole slew of media outfits. And that included publications like Dash Meredith, publisher of popular magazines like People, Food and Wine, Better, Homes and Gardenings, and etc. The future investigation also found shoddy ad copy in USA Today and Los Angeles Times. So as we're going more in this area of declining ad revenue, we'll see more of this direction of journalism going into this field of producing shoddy ad copy, mostly for SEO optimization and clicking of links. And the decline of local journalism means we'll get less and less of actual journalists working to hold power to account and do the important work of democracy. That said, I don't want to say it's all grim. I want to end this talk on a high note. Oops, and this thing went ahead and came back. There we go. So AI is not inevitable, and there are ways that you can fight back. There are things we can do collectively and individually to resist AI hype in this hype cycle and the next, no matter what the technology happens to be and how it's marketed. We can burst this bubble through pointed questions and poignant ridicule. We can build up information literacy, both through our individual practice and through supporting and learning from other informational institutions, namely libraries. Shout out to everybody here on the call working in libraries and library institutions. We can collectively shape innovation towards benefiting people at large rather than enriching the few through enforcing existing regulation and crafting new. And we can and must resist narratives and inevitability through collective action and strategic refusal. The AI bubble seems close to popping, or at least deflating dramatically this year. This really is a make or break year for AI. Darren Osamoglu, apologies, I know I'm mispronouncing that name. Labor economist at MIT, also recent Nobel laureate, published an estimate that productivity gains from AI will be less than 0.53% over the next 10 years. On an investment call after its 24 Q2 earnings report, Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai was grilled with questions about when its big bet on AI, to the tune of $12 billion per quarter, would pay off. And David Kahn at VC giant Sequoia Capital wrote in June 2024 that AI firms need to turn something like $600 billion in revenue for the AI bet to pay off. In the interim, we have some strategies which may help deflate that bubble even faster than before. So the first one of those strategies is to ask questions. First, ask what is the actual task of being automated? What is being given to the automated system as input and output? Often the marketing copy for a system serves to obscure these simple facts. So for example, the Hippocratic AI advertises those healthcare agents and provides little biographies for each of them. But the actual input here is spoken patient responses and questions. And the output is word-shaped noises that are likely to show up next, given the training data. It should go without saying that this isn't skilled nursing, and it removes the veneer that it is. I'm going to put this cat down. This is Clara, by the way. So I'm going to put her down and hope she doesn't interrupt the talk again. Second, can you connect the inputs to the outputs? What is the evidence here that there's sufficient information to connect inputs and outputs? For example, researchers at Harrisburg University of Science and Technology claimed in 2020 that they had created a system that could tell with 80% accuracy and no racial bias whether someone was a criminal based on a picture of their face. And we can apply this common sense. You can't tell whether someone is a criminal based on their face. That is modern physiognometry. There's a bunch of literature on this and so much of connecting this. Being a criminal has nothing to do with how somebody looks, it has everything to do with a person's behavior, which is constrained by their circumstances, social norms around what is considered a crime, and a legal regime someone finds themselves in. Moreover, they claim that the system lacked racial bias, which is preposterous given everything we know about racial discrimination and policing, and how poorly facial analysis systems perform with racial minorities. Third, are these systems being described as human? The AI sales pitch really depends on language that anthropomorphizes to assigning levels of intelligence and consciousness to the tools. So in one example, I'm reminded actually on how, no, this is on a different example. So we're anthropomorphizing creatures. It takes effort to keep some critical distance here. Calling a chatbot-based system an AI teaching assistant, which Morehouse College has said it would start doing in fall 24, suggests they can do more than what it actually does. Think of a human teaching assistant. Thinking of a human teaching assistant, we immediately imagine someone who cares about their students, makes plans about how to make them better, how to help them, spots possible cases of misunderstanding, and relates to students as people getting knowledge and skills that help them grow to new roles in the community. An AI teaching assistant does none of those things. For any system sold as an AI blank human role, we can always ask what motivates calling this thing by this name, what else do we expect of people in this role, and who is falling for the system that can also do these things. Fourthly, how are these systems evaluated? You'll often see very aggressive AI evaluation metrics, such as accuracy or performance advertised by AI boosters. Hypers will claim that systems are over 80% accurate and that they do better at a particular task compared to people. Mira Murati, again, former OpenAI CTO, claimed that GPT-5 would have PhD level intelligence. And that led everybody on Twitter and Blue Sky to joke, people with PhDs to joke that the system would take on massive debt, burn out, and pursue a passion project in the food industry. But it also begs two answers. The claim begs two questions. What was actually measured, and how does it relate to the intended use of the system? Often, we really just don't have that information, or when we dig beneath the surface, the test is facile at best. Fifth, who benefits from the technology, who is harmed, and what recourse did they have? If a system is implemented, which organizations will benefit? Who will be harmed, both in cases where the system gives the right answer and which cases where it doesn't. We've seen many, many cases where automation makes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Sometimes it's corporations and their shareholders using automation as an excuse to replace well-paid workers with more precarious ones. In other cases, it's governments using automation as a band-aid over gaping holes in our social safety net. But the harms aren't always economic. For example, automated surveillance further terrorizes over police communities, and automated media synthesis machines pollute our information ecosystem. How is this, and lastly, was the system developed, and what are their labor and data practices? We could and shall always ask these questions. Often, the apparent human-like competence of systems sold as AI is actually due to the work of humans, usually under exploitative working conditions. Just as we do with fast fashion, chocolate, and similar commodities, looking into labor practices gives us a better idea to make ethical decisions in our own consumer patterns, and more importantly, when we find ourselves with the power to impact larger systems. So everyday resistance. As a worker, you can push back against these tools at your job. If the past has been any guide, these tools will be introduced against a better judgment of workers because managers believe they'll increase productivity. Unions like the Writers Guild of America and National Nurses United have made it a priority to resist the encroachment of AI in the workplace. Other unions that represent workers that bosses are dying to automate away, such as teachers, administrative assistants, and even dock workers, ought to make it a priority to fight these efforts too. On an individual level, sometimes methods of everyday resistance work the best. As a consumer, you have the option simply not to use these tools. Don't use ChatGPT. Don't use Midjourney. When your favorite app offers a new flashy AI-enabled tool, just don't click it. Companies and websites keep extensive metrics on where and when these users click or use a feature. If they find that no one is using their AI nonsense, they'll be more likely to remove that shiny button with the stereotypical sparkle emoji and quietly sunset the feature. That is, if they have any business sense. And something that is driving me wild now, Google Suite now for corporate accounts have introduced these dark patterns where you will accidentally click the Gemini logo almost every time. That's because it's working. No one wants this shit. And as a savvy media consumer, you can also make fun of the awfulness that is synthetic content. Has a friend posted AI-generated artwork on Instagram? Make fun of it. Did a brand use AI to generate six-figure people enjoying their product on the beach? Troll the hell out of them. It is your right. The more we can pierce the cultural bubble that Sam Altman and his kind live in, the better we can upset the idea that the encroaching of these systems into everyday life is inevitable. Synthetic media is cheap and tacky. Let them know. AI hype is widespread and pernicious. It's a lonely experience to feel like the only one in the room trying to push back when everyone else is caught up in a dreamland of what the technology will do for them. And the FOMO threaded through the hype makes all of this worse. The hype mongers not only spin fantastical tales of what the tech can do, but also work to convince you that if you don't jump on the bandwagon, you'll be left in the dust. But resisting hype can also be empowering, grounding, and even joyful. It is empowering to reaffirm the value of our skills and expertise. It is grounding to lean into the value of human to human connection, of being human together. It can be flat out fun to find the silliest excesses of hype machine and deflate it, with ridicule as practice. The only way we build tech that works for us is to see past the facade and ask what kind of future we want to create together. So with that, thank you so much. The icon is out in May 13th and is available for pre-order at thecon.ai. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hanna. And I'm placing the book link again in the chat. And yeah, and I just want to thank you for synthesizing the different technologies and systems that make up the AI hype, and you've outlined the harms and costs to a variety of industries of automation. And some of that was just straight up creepy. Yeah, so we've got some questions here on the question and answer. Stephanie Bean says, thank you for your expertise and such a wonderful talk. What are some ways we can resist AI hype? I've attended a number of talks within our own field, and I saw an ArtNet article yesterday of a court case where images are generated by text cannot be protected by copyright. Ugh. And if grand apparatuses like hospitals, police states are surveilling us and violating HIPAA, how do we know? How can we resist? Once we know, it all feels very existential.
Yeah, great question, Stephanie. And I think I see you also had mentioned about the environmental disaster, and yeah, I didn't even get to that. I mean, I think that's something that needs to be harped on quite a bit. Yeah, so how do we push back within our own field? I mean, I think that's important. I think someone else asked that. In terms of knowing whether tools are being used right now, there are not many mechanisms for that, but one of the possible tools or types of demands we can make within our own municipalities is trying to fight for AI registries. This is becoming more and more popular as a tool. I think San Francisco has one. New York also recently released one. We talk about two cases in the book, one in Finland and one in Amsterdam. And it does allow for a bit of transparency in actually seeing what's there. So, one outstanding question with AI registries is whether they become an effective tool for any kind of potential litigation, or knowing whether you were subject to the decision that was the output of that, which again, you may only know that the city uses a registry, and this is only in public use. There's not much in disclosure of private use. But whether you're the actual, whether you've been subjected to the output of that, at the individual level, there's not really any way of knowing that. How can we resist once we know? I mean, I think there might be different ways of approaching that. There might be ways of approaching it through discrimination law. I mean, there's been, I think, since 2016, there's been some legal work in terms of challenging based on discrimination themselves. So for instance, a really famous court case that unfortunately didn't go a great way was Loomis versus the state of Wisconsin, which was challenging in particular the use of an automated decision system in pretrial risk assessment. Unfortunately, the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled in the state's favor. So unfortunately, there's not a lot in terms of federal legislation on the table, especially with the new Trump regime and the new the composition of the federal legislature. But there might be some in particular states, especially thinking when it comes to recourse and particular sorts of labor or personal rights violations.
Thanks,
Yes.
thanks, Dr. Hanna. We have another question. This one from Griselle, who says, I am wondering about how libraries should participate in AI campus policies, especially the ethics involved in using AI in the learning environment.
Yeah, I think that's a great decision. I mean, if you as librarians, as important members of a campus community, are able to serve on AI task force or other things of like, I mean, it is very, I mean, it's incredibly needed to discuss, to be involved. I mean, I think one of the things that librarians are very well situated to argue is that librarians have a huge role in tasks which are potentially getting relegated to chatbots. Large language models are purported to be replacements for many roles in the library, and especially we see this in terms of reference finding and the work of data librarianship. And in the book we talk a little bit about, we follow here two great scholars and librarians, Anna Lauren Hoffman and Rania Bloom, in which there's sort of like an idea in which, well, just Google it, you know, I mean, it's the same kind of strategy that I think librarians have been fighting for so long. Well, Google's not going to tell you all the things you need. And now we're even one more step removed from Google. We're saying, well, just chat GPT it or whatever. So not only are you going from a place where you would have seen some kind of information provenance in Google, despite, you know, it's absolutely messed up index, which folks like Sophia Noble talk about, and how it's very biased towards white and sources, especially when you're looking up information on racial minorities. But the fact that now you don't even have that information provenance part, right? And so librarians, I think, really doubling down and saying what they do and how they're so important for the intellectual infrastructure of the university, need to be involved in those discussions.
Thank you, Dr. Hanna. We have another question from Claire Nickerson. How is generative AI affecting scholarly research practices?
Yeah, unfortunately, not great. You know, there's a part in the book in chapter 5 where we talk all about scholarship. We talk about all about science. And there have been many different kinds of ways in which we've seen AI hype really infect science. It kind of was kicked off by this Facebook tool called Galactica that Jan LeCun, who's chief AI scientist at Google, was parading around. And Galactica basically said it could write a research paper. It was kind of paraded around, and but then when people started actually digging into it, it got laughed at the web, provided basically nonsense citations. Um, Nothing really made sense in its output. They also had a guardrails around it that prevented it asking about things like AIDS or queer theory or race or critical race theory. So maybe it looked, you know, maybe it's doing, you know, maybe it was doing what the current administration is trying to do to the NSF, but you know, I don't think that was the intent of it. It was taken off the web, um, you know, but we're seeing it being used in all kinds of places, supplanting peer review, being you writing of papers. I mean, it's all over, and I mean, certain kinds of industries, certain professional associations have provided guidelines saying that, if you're going to use them, you need to absolutely double check this. But at that point, why use them at all? And so it's really affecting scholarly research practice. I mean, there's just reams of AI slop being published in actual scholarly journals. It's not a great situation right now.
Actually, we have another question, and I think this is a follow-up from the chat. Could you just talk a little bit about the work of DARE
Sure.
there and just highlight it? Because we'd love to know more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So DARE is a nonprofit nonprofit research institute that focuses on two pillars. The one is identifying different kinds of locations of AI harm and technological harm. It's not just AI. I mean, we also have supported projects like Surveillance Watch, that as Shafi has published, which is a site for mapping different types of companies and funding networks of surveillance. And I think this book, and as well as our related podcasts, do a lot of that work. Our podcast is Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000, in which we focus on types of harms that have been introduced by AI. We also do the work of trying to imagine new futures around technology, and a lot of that has to do with building technology that is very focused on local practices, on people who tend not to be resourced at all. A lot of that has to do with supporting groups and organizations that are sovereign of their own data and do not use huge everything machine, as our founder Timnit Jabru has called them. We don't use those types of technologies because those are based on immense undocumented and stolen data. And so we support those efforts in many different ways. And so one example is, we've supported a startup by one of our fellows, Asmalash Teka, and his startup's called Lisan.ai, which is an organization that is building machine translation and automatic speech recognition tools for languages in Ethiopian and Eritrea.
Thank you for that. We've been dropping some links in the chat. Be sure
Thank
to
you.
check that. Lots of support for your Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000. We have another question here. Are there, from Anonymous, are there any situations where AI tools can be useful to a student, such as finding the key issues surrounding a topic to go to get keywords, comparing perplexity, let's see here, or helping students identify key issues to be researched about a topic?
I mean, maybe I really don't think that. I mean, it seems like it'd be easier just to cut out the AI tool together and go to the library. But I know I mean, that can be an uphill battle, but I don't really think for the big startup cost that it requires, and for all the other issues regarding data, environmental costs. I mean, I don't think it's particularly working. I mean, it also might be it might lead them astray too. I mean, you have to think of something like Google's AI overviews, which, are very, well known for producing bullshit. It could produce a whole set of keywords that are not even helpful for that student. So I can't think of too many. I don't think that would be a great use case.
Thank you. I'm particularly fascinated by the conversations about resistance, because I feel like maybe this person's question kind of played into this. It feels like, at least here on my campus, that you talked about that inevitability mindset, Dr. Hanna,
Mhm.
about AI. And it feels like campus administration is kind of promoting the message of just figure out how to use it because it's inevitable. So I'm really appreciating the conversations about how we can leverage our expertise and
Mhm.
yeah, but I think Franz has another question queued up for us here.
Yeah.
I like this question a lot. What were your favorite aspects of researching and writing this book?
Yeah, this book was it really came about organically because Emily and I had spent so much time with our podcast and building this repository of of really outlandish cases. I think, I think that the really nice part was really just outlining it and putting it all in one place. We wrote the book very quickly. I mean, seriously, over the course of 4 or 5 months. So it was, which I don't think one person can do alone. But the nice thing is, I think was, um, going into them. I think some of the funner things were researching some of the claims. Um, for instance, our fact checker, Deca Muldowney, spent a lot of time researching where Steve Ballmer gave that developers speech. It was actually a .NET framework conference. Yeah, I mean, it's so decontextualized. It's very weird. So I think going down those little rabbit holes was a pretty fun part of it. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think the process of it was it was yeah, it was great to sort of revisit and give some of these things some more time and space to breathe and really expand on all the examples.
Thanks again. I'm going to take us back up here to one of the first questions that was put in the Q&A from Anonymous. Going back again to our conversations about resistance of the inevitability. Anonymous asks, for workers and professionals seeking to demonstrate their relevance and value in the face of the AI hype machine. You talked about this a little bit, but just giving you space for more, what suggestions would you have for resisting this dystopian future?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, I think, there's a lot that I think can be done here. And I mean, I think some of the more interesting conversations I've had have been with some of these AI working groups that often are set up by unions or set up by worker organizations. Um, I think a lot of it is identifying. I mean, it depends on kind of what might be a argument that works with a particular decision maker. I've had conversations, for instance, with people in the News Guild, and some of the argument that works is, well, you're not going to get something that actually is, people are going to want to read if you have this. It's going to be a lot of very rote things. Sometimes the argument is more economical. I'm going to spend just as much time, fixing this thing, which might be the intent for some people. I mean, so that was the argument being made by the WGA. Um, and sometimes it's not actually, there's not really a sense of reasoning with management. I mean, it is, several organizations have gone on strike, specifically with AI being one of the key demands because the value proposition is meant to be um, cheapening the labor itself. And so, it depends on kind of what the relationship is between, I think, management. If you have the ability, a labor union, if you have the ability to act collectively, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it and a huge benefit.
Um, Thank you. I've got another question, and it's sort of related to that, pushing back from an anonymous attendee. And they ask that libraries pay a lot of money for vendor resources that now have LLMs integrated to them. I think that might be one area where we have power as librarians to resist. And if we can get a critical mass in a profession, and this person would be interested in any thoughts on this as a possible approach.
I think that's great. I mean, I think pushing against particular vendors together would be a really, really great approach. I mean, if there is some work that can be done specifically outlining the vendor themselves and some of their own different practices, whether that's labor, whether that's data, whether that's kind of threat of copyright suits, I mean, any kind of thing, any kind of power that you have. I mean, we're at the point where some of the strongest things are some of the strongest arms we have are things like copyright. And copyright is a weird vector. We don't have, say, rights of personality that are super strong in the US, or moral rights. Copyright has been sort of the one thing that has made OpenAI scared. There's been multiple suits against them right now. And so, if there's strategic litigation, that might also be a strategy. If they're sort of forcing universities to drop that, if there's statements that you could push through the ALA or professional associations, that might also be a strategy. And at this point, I think any kind of approach that you approach collectively, I'd say is a good one.
Thanks, Dr. Hanna. I know we're getting towards the end of our time here, so I wanted to give an opportunity for you to tell us how best can we keep up with you and keep up with the work that you're doing. What is the best avenue for that?
Thanks. So you could follow me. Ooh, I just saw in the chat by Christina saying ALA has come out in defense of AI theft of intellectual property. Terrible. Yeah, so yeah, you can find me at Alex Hanna on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn. Usually Blue Sky is my platform of choice. You can continually listen to the Mystery AI Hype Theater 3000 podcast. Yeah, you can email me at alex@dare-institute.org. I think those are mostly the best ways to reach me. You can tie a note to Clara, and she will wander up to me.
All
Thank you.
right, so our time is coming to an end. Thank you to Alex and our moderators, Courtney and Franz. Can we get some applause for them? Thank you to Loyola Marymount University for its support of the Institute for Research Design in Librarianship. Thank you to the Institute of Museum and Library Services for your consistent support of IRDL since 2014. And thank you to the team that labored to put together this learning event. We look forward to learning alongside you at our next one. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the session. Thank you very much for everyone who attended.
Thank you. Have a great day.